Hi, it's Kayla, and today I wanted to give you guys an update on my job. So I posted a video about 6-ish months ago, telling you guys that I got my dream job, talking about my interview process, how my employer reacted to my blindness, all of that stuff. And I said that I was going to give an update on the job itself once I had been there for a while. So I told myself I'd give it 6 months so I'd really get into it and then tell you guys all about it. And so I have hit that mark. I've been there a little bit over 6 months. So I wanted to update you guys on how it's going and then just talk about the job itself and what it's like being a blind therapist and just how I do that. So let's start with my company, kind of do an update there. So everything is still really great. I love it there. Everyone is super supportive. It's a very, very healthy work culture. I'm very happy there. Love all my coworkers. It's great. I really don't have a lot to say about that. I don't really have any accommodations because I work remote, as do most other people at my company, or I guess some people are hybrid, but everyone is at least a little bit remote. So pretty much everything is done electronically. Everything that has to do with the job, any kind of documents, forms, anything like that is all already electronic. And then I do telehealth, and our documentation for our clients is all electronic. We use what's called an EHR, electronic health records. It's called Simple Practice, and we do all of our session notes, assessments, diagnosing, treatment plans. We schedule our clients all on there. So everything was already electronic, which is really the only accommodation I need because I can just get on there with my screen reader, which I guess I should mention that. It's all accessible with JAWS. So yeah, I haven't needed to ask for anything extra or needed really any accommodations of any kind. My blindness really never comes up with my job because really I just have my clients, I do my thing, and that's about it. So yeah, there's really not a lot to report there. But if I ever do have any kind of issue, which I haven't really, but if there ever is something, everyone is really, really supportive, and I still feel very welcomed and valued there. So with that update out of the way, now we can talk a little bit about the job part of the job and what it's like being a blind therapist. So for some context, a lot of people ask me what kind of therapist I am. I'm not a specific kind. I say general adult mental health. So I see a little bit of everything. So of course, anxiety, depression, some OCD, PTSD, postpartum, just general life stress or relationship issues, just all kinds of things, which I love. I like having a variety. And I said adult mental health. I have seen a couple of teens, but I do not see kids. So that's kind of the type of therapist I am. And so how it works is I work at a group practice. So people will either contact the company because they've seen us online, heard about us, whatever, they want to be seen for therapy, or we get referrals, and then they meet with one of our intake people, and then they collect information, what they're being seen for, what they're wanting out of a therapist, and then they will match that person with a therapist. So the clients that I see, they kind of are filtered into my company, and then my company matches them with me. And yeah, that's how that works. And like I said, I do all telehealth right now. I have the option to see clients in office if I would like to. I haven't yet. I've toyed around with the idea of doing that. It's a little difficult with transportation because the office is probably 45 minutes or so away from where I live. So it's so much easier to do telehealth. So that's what I do. So one of the most common questions that I get asked by people is if I tell my clients that I'm blind. And yes, I do tell them in the very first session I have with them, about 5 or so minutes into the session. So I kind of have like my flow of how I have the first session go. So, they come on to the session and I say, hi, blah, blah, blah. It's nice to meet you. How are you? I ask them to tell me a little bit about themselves. We chat about that for a minute. And then I share kind of what they can expect from me as a therapist, my style of therapy. And then I say something along the lines of, and something else I'll let you know about me is that I am actually blind. I have very little functional vision left, so I can kind of only see like the outline of you, and that's about it. So I just like to be upfront about that and let people know that if you make some kind of gesture or expression, or if you like shake your head at me, I can't see that, and I don't ever want anyone to think that I've ignored them. So I just ask that you be verbal with me, and if you ever have any questions or concerns about how that may impact your treatment, I'm totally open to that. I promise you won't offend me or hurt my feelings. The way that I look at it is that everyone has something that they deal with, whether it be like a mental health thing or what have you, and this is just my thing that I deal with. That's my spiel. Yes, it's a little rehearsed. I say it quite often. So that's what I say to them. And I choose to do it at that point in the session because I don't ever want it to be like the first thing out of my mouth, because that's awkward. Just to be like, hi, I'm Kayla, I'll be your therapist and I'm blind. That feels weird for it to be that upfront, but I also don't want to wait and do it farther into the session, because if I'm like doing our intake assessment and I ask them a question, if they're like shaking their head or nodding their head at me and I can't see it, and we have to have that conversation in the middle of their assessment, it feels like a weird place to have it. So I like to be upfront about it, tell them before we really get into anything, but we have a couple of minutes of kind of chit chat beforehand to like ease into it. Also, I think it gives them a chance to kind of just see me and how I interact, because a lot of them probably have no idea that I'm blind if I didn't tell them. And so I think it gives them a chance to see like, oh, okay, well, she seems like a normal person and like she knows what she's doing. So it's cool. Because my company has asked me if I want them to tell clients ahead of time, like when they're matched with me, that I'm blind, like before they ever meet me. I've said no, because to me that feels like it's making a bigger deal of it than it needs to be like, oh, this therapist is blind. Is that okay with you? Just feels like unnecessary emphasis. And I think to a lot of people, I've never met a blind person, and so they may be a little weirded out by that. If it's before they've ever met me, they may think, oh, blind therapist, I don't know if I want that. But once they've met me and then I tell them, I think it gives them a couple of minutes to get to know me outside of the blindness. So yeah, and my clients have never reacted negatively. I've gotten a range of like pretty neutral responses. People are just like, okay, and that's about it. And then some people are like, oh, thank you for telling me. I'll work on being verbal. Yeah, it's either like neutral to positive reaction. I've never had a bad reaction. Well, I've had one person, just one, who did not want to see me because I was blind. I will talk more about that, I guess, towards the end of this video. But other than that, it's one person in 6 months. I've probably seen at least over 50 people this far. So yeah, it's usually like a neutral / positive reaction. And I think sharing this with them, especially up front, really helps to build the therapeutic relationship in a couple of ways. One being that they're about to share a bunch of really personal things with me, and I've just shared something personal about myself with them. And so I think that helps to just build this like openness, kind of like break those walls down and have some reciprocity of like, I'm not just sitting here absorbing all of the personal stuff you're sharing with me. I've given a little bit back because I've shared something personal with you. And so I think it helps them just to feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit closer to me. And I also think having a little bit of reciprocity in the relationship, in like, I'm helping them, obviously, because that's what they're paying me to do, but also they're helping me help them by being verbal with me. And I think that helps to cut down some of the like perceived power differential that can kind of happen in a therapeutic relationship. And I think it helps too for them to feel like, okay, I'm not the only one who struggles here. My therapist struggles too. And then they may feel a little bit less vulnerable in sharing their hard stuff with me. And I think people too feel a lot less vulnerable, less uncomfortable when their therapist can't see them. It's easier to talk about hard stuff when someone's not looking at you or when you're not face to face with someone. So I think the fact that I can't see them helps them to open up a little bit more with things that they may be uncomfortable to talk about. And I think that's helpful too. I've had a few clients tell me like, oh, that makes me feel better. And also I think too, especially people feel very vulnerable and uncomfortable crying in front of other people. They don't like people to see them cry. And here I am, I cannot see them cry. And so I've said before, like, you could be the ugliest crier ever and I would have no idea. So, feel free to cry in here. So yeah, that's just a few ways that I think it helps to build that therapeutic relationship. Now, another question that I get asked a lot is, how do I do therapy without being able to see their facial expressions or body language, which I think is something that a lot of sighted therapists rely on a lot with those visual cues. And I don't get those, but I really don't think it's a big deal. I feel like I make up for it in other ways. For example, with hearing, I could hear a lot by their tone of voice, just like their tone of voice, kind of their speech patterns. I get most of my information from that. Also, I can hear in their voice if someone is like tearing up. I can definitely hear if they're actively crying. And there's also this nifty little trick called just ask them. I told you in the beginning, I asked them to be verbal with me. They're usually really good about that. And I can always just pause and ask them, what are you feeling right now? And they tell me. I don't have to read their face. And I think sometimes some sighted therapists forget that that's an option. So, for example, if I feel like I'm hearing in their voice that they're tearing up, but I'm not sure, I can say, what are you feeling right now? Or it sounds like a lot of emotion is coming up for you. What are those emotions? If you could identify those, if we could name them, something like that. And sometimes if I'm wrong and they're not tearing up and I just ask, what are you feeling right now? They may say, oh, I'm feeling blah, 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 and it's something else. And will think, oh, okay, they weren't tearing up. I was wrong. But that question is kind of like a catch-all that I could be on the wrong track in my assumptions. And then I've asked them how they felt and then they told me. So yeah, I think that's helpful. And also I think it's good to give clients autonomy in that way. They get to tell me how they're feeling. I'm not making assumptions. I think too, some sighted therapists rely too much on those visual cues and they make assumptions about how clients are feeling based on what they're seeing, and they could be wrong and they're not taking the chance to check in with the client because they think that they're just all knowing with their vision. So I like asking the client how they're feeling. I think that is more helpful for the relationship than me being able to see their expressions and make those assumptions. I think sometimes I do wish that I could see those nonverbal cues though, like facial expressions. I mean, really just in my everyday life, I would love to be able to see expressions and body language. I feel like it's like a superpower that side of people have. So I think there are times where it would be helpful, particularly in just the flow of conversation, because sometimes if they're not talking, I'm like, okay, are they thinking? Are they processing this? Are there emotions coming up that they're kind of processing? Or are they waiting for me to ask the next question, say the next thing? Are we ready to move on to a different topic? I think that is difficult. And, also I said that I pick up a lot of emotion from, their voice. But if they're not talking, if I'm the one that's talking, then I don't really have any cues of kind of what they're feeling. So I don't know if their face is saying, yeah, blah, 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 you're talking too long, or I'm really not liking what you're saying, or if I'm kind of like striking a chord with them, or if I'm triggering them in some way. I don't know until I've stopped talking. And so sometimes I wish I could read them while I'm talking. But again, it's not that big of a deal because when I'm done talking, I can check in with them and gauge those feelings at that point. But I do find it a little challenging, like I said, with just kind of like the back and forth and knowing, when I should say something, if I should wait because it looks like they're mulling something over and they're about to talk. I mean, I deal with this just in regular life, in conversation. This isn't something that's specific to therapy, but sometimes I do feel a little awkward. But again, there's some verbal prompts that I can use of, was there something more that we wanted to say about this, or should we move on to something else? Or, are you still processing this? Or something like, I have a question or I have a thought, but before we move on to that, I just want to check in, is there more we want to say about this? Something like those. And another layer on top of this too is telehealth, in that sometimes it freezes or there's a lag or something and I can't tell. So there's already that question of, if there's a pause in the dialogue, are they processing? Are they ready to move on to the next thing? Or is it frozen? And I don't know. And so sometimes that can feel a little awkward and challenging. But it's like everything else, it's really not that big of a deal. It doesn't happen a ton. And yeah, that's just something that we deal with telehealth, and no one cares. Okay, so now I will touch on kind of the logistics of how I do the job. So I do my sessions on my iPad, and then in a typical session, I don't have my computer, I don't take any notes. It's just very kind of conversational. They talk, I listen, I talk a little bit, and I don't take any notes or do anything like that. And then after the session is over, pretty immediately after it's over, while everything is still fresh on my mind, I will type up my session notes. If I don't have enough time, I will jot down kind of like, I say jot down like I'm writing. I will type kind of like brief notes of what we talked about and then go back and fill it in later. I feel that that works really well for me, especially if I'm doing it right after while it's fresh on my mind. I can remember the majority of what we talked about during a session. Now, for our intakes, it's a little bit different because in the first session, there's a lot of specific questions I need to ask and information that I need to gather. So for those sessions, I have our intake assessment pulled up on my computer that I'll have next to my iPad, and then I will have in like one earbud so I can use my screen reader to read me the intake assessment. And so I'll just go through, I'll ask them the questions, type up their answers. Not a big deal, easy peasy. And that's really the only session that I'll use my computer. So yeah, that's how I do that. Not a whole lot else to say about that. I do sometimes wish that I could easily like pull things up on my computer during session. Sometimes they'll be talking about something and I'm like, oh, I want to pull up this handout on attachment styles and we can read over those styles, or oh, I know this good exercise or this good skill. And sometimes I wish that I could pull those up during session and like read over them really quickly. And I feel like I can't because I'm just not very quick on the computer unless I have it queued up and ready to go. If I'm prepared for it, then I guess I could. But if it's something that I think of during the session, I just feel like it will take too much time for me to go find it. And then I'm trying to deal with my screen reader, trying to listen to what it's saying and repeat. Like I can't read things out loud. It's very difficult to listen to what's in my ear and then repeat it back. So I think sometimes that's a bummer, or that I can't screen share. I know sometimes, like, because I go to therapy, sometimes my therapist will, pull up a video for us to watch, or, for like a relevant CBT skill or something like that. And I wish that I could do that in session. I wish that I could screen share, pull things up easily. I don't know. I maybe could screen share. I think it'd take a lot of figuring out. Also, I don't know how that works with the voiceover, and I don't want my voiceover to be like talking over them while they're talking. I just don't know how that would work, so I don't do that. I mean, if I really, really wanted to figure it out, maybe I could. But then there's also, I just feel like I'm slow to like find things, and I don't want to waste their session time. So usually if I've thought of something that I wanted to share with them, I will just send it to them after the session, which again is fine. It's not ruining anyone's therapy experience. Oh, and that also reminds me of that. So I have a couple of clients that we do some kind of therapy workbook with. So I had one we were doing, I think it's called the postpartum anxiety and OCD workbook, something like that. And so I had a Kindle version of this workbook. Again, I can't just read aloud, which I so wish I could just flip through a workbook and say, oh yeah, this section, and just read it to them. But I can't do that. So what I would do is read a chapter in the workbook, and then I would type on my computer the things that I thought were relevant, the things that I wanted to share. And then in that session, I would put in my earbud and then have my screen reader read it to me, try to be listening and repeating to them what it was saying. And it was very clunky. It did not work super well. It also took up a lot of extra of my time because I'm reading this chapter and then typing like verbatim the things that I wanted to share, questions to ask, activities, exercises to do. Took up a lot of extra time. Didn't work great. So I have another client. We're doing an OCD workbook. And what I've found works a lot better is that we both have a copy of the workbook. I have a Kindle version. I think she has like a paper version. And so we'll assign a homework or assign a chapter for homework. So we'll say, okay, this week we'll both read chapter 3. And then so outside of session, we both read chapter 3. And then when we come back together, we discuss it. And, I'll say, what'd you think of the chapter? She'll say, oh, I thought these parts were interesting. I can put in my 2 cents of the parts that I thought were interesting. And then she will flip through her copy of the book and say, oh yeah, this part, blah, blah, blah. We can discuss it. And then there's different kind of exercises or questions to answer throughout the chapters. So I'll say, okay, what were some of the exercises? Let's look at those. And she'll flip through. Okay, the first one, it asked me to do this. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that because I read that. And then she'll read me what she wrote down. And it works so much better. It's a lot less work on me. So I'm reading the material, but I'm not having to write it out or memorizing it. She's kind of guiding the conversation. And yeah, I think that works better. Also, giving the client autonomy. She gets to flip through the chapter and tell me what things stuck out to her. And she can go through and, tell me what she put for the exercises rather than me asking. And it works a lot better. So tidbit, I don't know if any blind therapists or aspiring blind therapists are watching this video, but I think that works a lot better. And also that I think this is true for most any jobs, that there's going to be trial and error. You're going to do things that don't work great, and then you're going to figure out a new way to do it. So yeah, I guess that's about it about how I do my job. I really, 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 really love my job. I think it's what I'm meant to do. I'm very excited to go to work every day. And I think it's a very blind-friendly profession. It's mostly listening, some thinking, like making interpretations, insights, coming up with helpful strategies, and then talking, communicating those things. So those are all things that blind people can do. I mean, not to minimize or say that this is super easy, because the thinking part is, takes a lot of years of education and all of that stuff to learn all these therapeutic modalities. But as far as it being blind friendly, those are all things that blind people can do very easily. And so, yeah, I do think it's a very blind friendly profession. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Oh, I did forget to tell you guys the story about the client who didn't want to see me because I'm blind. So I guess I'll tell that very quickly. So backing up quite a bit, when I was in grad school, I was pretty nervous about wanting to be a therapist because I was afraid that people weren't going to want to see me because I'm blind. Those were all, my own insecurities. But it's something that I worried about a lot, and it's something that I worried about a lot in first starting this job. And as I kept on seeing more and more and more clients and no one cared, I stopped worrying about it. So this wasn't that long ago. I was maybe 5 months into the job or so, 4 or 5 months into the job. I had an intake session with the client. We did the whole session. We, went ahead and scheduled her for another one at the end of it. And everything was fine. The next day, I got an email that she had requested to have a therapist transfer. And so my initial thought was, oh, did I do something wrong? I'm going over and over the session in my head. Did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? What happened? And then I kind of came to terms with it of okay, maybe she didn't like my style of therapy. Maybe she thought I was too young. Maybe we just didn't vibe. That's fine. That happens. Not every therapist is a good fit for every client. Sometimes you just don't vibe, and that's fine. So I was thinking, okay, that's cool. It's whatever. That's fine. And then I found out later that she had requested a different therapist because she didn't feel comfortable with the fact that I was blind. And she wanted a therapist that would be able to see her expressions and all of that stuff. And so my first thought was, I can't believe I didn't think of that when I was going over that session of, did I do something wrong? Why'd she request a transfer? What could it have been? I didn't even think about it being because I'm blind, which is so far from where I came from, where if someone had requested a therapist transfer when I was brand new, that would have been my first and only thought, must be because I'm blind, and I would have just stopped right there. And this time, it didn't cross my mind at all. So that was kind of crazy to me. I was like, how did I not even think about that? But also, I think that's good because it shows how far I've come from that insecurity. And then I was a little hurt because, you know, it hit me right in the insecurity. But ultimately I thought about it and I was like, you know what, if she needs a therapist that's able to see her expressions because she doesn't have the capacity to be verbal, then that's fine. Like I want her to have what she needs. I want her to have a therapist that is going to be as beneficial to her as possible. And, you know, if I'm not a good fit because she needs something different to help in her healing, then that's okay. And I came to terms with it pretty quickly because I do think if someone does not have the capacity to be verbal with me, then they're probably not a good fit. Do I wish maybe she would have given me a chance to show her that it may not be as big of a deal as she may thought, and that I'm pretty good at, you know, reading their emotions from other cues? Yeah, maybe I would have liked for her to have given me a chance, but ultimately that's her decision. You know, she has autonomy to see or not see whatever therapist that she wants to. And, you know, I'm in the business of helping people. So if someone feels like I'm not going to be helpful to them, then, you know, I don't want them to see me because I want them to get the help that they need. So that was that situation. I think a lot of other people were a lot more upset about the situation, like upset for me than I was upset about it. But like I said, that's been one person this entire time. So it looks like that's not something that people are super concerned about. So anyways, that is all about my job. If you guys have any questions about my job, what it's like being a blind therapist, if you are a therapist, a blind therapist yourself, if you are interested in that career, or if you're just a curious person, and if you have any questions, leave those in the comments below. I will answer them, or if I get enough of them, maybe I'll do another video and answer those questions. But I hope you guys liked this video, and I will see you next time.